Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for ADramOfOutlander.com for all things Outlander, from the Dinah Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and everything in between. This is podcast episode 120, and we are in week 6 of the Drums of Autumn read-along. Hello, hello. I hope you are enjoying it so far. We get to meet Aunt Jocasta in this episode, and she's amazing. So the summary goes something like this. Down but not out, they dress in their best to meet Aunt Jocasta. River Run is a beautiful and large plantation. Young Ian and Rollo have a run-in with the very dangerous skunk. They take a tour of the estate and go to the turpentine area. There's a business meeting. There's an explosion. A lunch and some whiskey, and contracts are signed. Jamie wants to know why there was a charade. Letters from home make the heart happy. Great. Inside the chapter, Chapter 10, Jocasta, Cross Creek, North Carolina, June 1767. Now remember, in the show notes, in the blog post, or if you are listening through Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Google Play, you can read all the show notes. There are underlined links to things I found of interest. So I did put in a link for the history of Cross Creek, North Carolina. It is very interesting, and I hope you enjoy. Cross Creek was a bustling town, and it smelled heavily of turpentine. The pitch, turpentine, and tar were used by the shipyards. The British Navy was a huge purchaser. Underneath the resinous scents was another familiar odor, rum, and perhaps other distilled spirits. His nose for such things was still in good order, even though it had been 20 years since he worked for his cousin Jared in Paris. You haven't lost it, have you? 20 years before, he had managed his cousin Jared's wine business in Paris, and his nose and palate had been the awe of the winery tasting rooms. Oh, I expect I could still tell Moselle from horse piss if you held it right under my nose. But telling rum from turpentine is no great feat, is it? Oh, Jamie, Moselle from horse piss. And wherever I read quotes from the book, in the show notes, it'll say what page it's on. I use a Nook reader on my mini iPad, so the pages might not exactly line up if you were using the printed book or a different reader or a different font size. Mine's just in the average one. Of course, young Ian must take a deep breath to see if he can distinguish any other scents. No, he only smells turpentine. Jamie has a great concern that he looks like a beggar as the time draws near at meeting Aunt Jocasta. Claire looks him over carefully. He looks tidy and appropriate except for the shoes. There hadn't been time to have any made. She notes the coat and waistcoat with sober pewter buttons made him look like a prosperous Quaker. She tells him he's beautiful. Young Ian, on the other hand, looked like quite a grubby mess. Once his coat was brushed and hair combed, he looked a bit more suitable. He wants to know if Jamie's going to tell Aunt Jocasta about the pirates. Jamie glanced briefly at Captain Freeman's scrawny back. It was futile to expect that such a story would not be told in every tavern in Cross Creek as soon as they left us. It would be a matter of days, hours perhaps, before it spread to River Run Plantation. I'll tell her, But not just on the instant, Ian. Let her get accustomed to us first. Always so practical. River Run is several miles up from Cross Creek, so Claire was able to tend to her own cleanliness after ensuring the men were tidy. She had no choice but to put on the cream gown she wore to the dinner with the governor. She thought it might be a bit fancy for daytime, but her other options were too grubby or threadbare. She tied her hair back and shined up her silver ring. She couldn't look at her left hand missing the gold ring. When her ablutions were complete, they were nearing the River Run dock. A young boy was keeping watch and ran to announce their arrival. Claire was in awe of the grandeur of the grounds and house. She decided her dress was not too much at the sight of it. People were coming out of the house toward the boat, but Claire spotted Jocasta easily. She has the bold Viking face of the Mackenzies. She is tall and striking with long white hair. She heard some of the young boys speaking Gaelic. Jamie steps up to Jocasta and simply says, "Aunt, it's Jamie." Jamie had a look about him that tells Claire Jocasta must look like his mother Ellen. And Aunt Jocasta was touching him with tears in her eyes. "Jamie, wee Jamie, oh, I'm glad you've come, lad. Blessed bride, but he's a giant. You'll be as tall as my brother Dougal was at least." She's very excited to see him, and she's touching his face all over. Jamie introduces Claire. As she holds Jocasta's hand, it reminds her startlingly like Brianna's hand. Claire notes that Jocasta smells like mint and verbena. Interestingly, she felt like she had come under the protection of a beneficent deity. Do you get the idea that Jocasta will simply be charitable and kind? I don't think so. She's a Mackenzie. After introductions to Fergus and young Ian, she calls for her butler, Ulysses, to escort them back in for tea and food. The house was large and airy on the inside. It appears Hector Cameron must have been quite successful. They went into Jocasta's private parlor. It's a more intimate and homey space, but just as well furnished as the other rooms. Jocasta is already seated. She offers them a dram of whiskey. Hector had taken it in trade, but it became illegal for anyone but the Crown to sell spirits. They ended up with 200 bottles. Jocasta toasts them, hoping they'll find River Run home. Keep your eye out on this. Is she simply trying to be courteous? The whiskey is very good. Claire enjoys the warming effects as it hits her belly. Jamie also relaxes a little. Jocasta mentions she'll have Ulysses write to Jenny to tell her of their safe arrival with young Ian. Interesting. Jocasta mentioned she'll have Ulysses write to Jenny. Why would her butler be the one to write to Jenny? Jamie takes this as the opening to tell her about the pirates and the problems with their finances because of it. She has the proper response to the tale and wants them to consider River Run their home. Be that as it may, nephew, I said you must consider River Run as your home. I did mean it. You and yours are welcome here, and I'm sure we shall contrive a way to mend your fortunes. Okay, so she's mentioned several times already she wants River Run to be their home. Jamie is thankful for his aunt's reply, but is also embarrassed. Like he can't even look her in the eye. Claire notes that the house is furnished simply with everything beautiful and well made. Young Ian had been moving about the room touching objects to the annoyance of the butler. Then he remarked on a painting. Aunt Jocasta, did you paint this? It's got your name on it. The view of the mountains, I've always loved the sight of them. I'd go with Hector when he went up into the back country to trade for hides. We'd camp in the mountains and set up a great blaze of bonfire with servants keeping it going day and night as a signal. So she did paint it. And Rollo now becomes agitated. There's a skunk outside in the garden. Jamie and young Ian's reactions are priceless. A skunk? They come so close to the house. Jamie had got up in a hurry and gone to peer out into the evening. I didn't see it yet. His hand groped automatically at his belt, but of course he wasn't wearing a dirk with his good suit. He turned to Jocasta. Have you any weapons in the house, Aunt? Jocasta's mouth hung open. Aye, plenty, but... Jamie, a skunk isn't... And Claire can't really finish, and all of a sudden chaos is breaking loose outside. Wait, Ian, look. A wide grin spread across his face, and he pointed to the border. The snapdragons parted, and a fine, fat skunk strolled into view, handsomely striped in black and white, and obviously feeling that all was right with his personal world. That's a skunk? Why, that's no but a bitty wee sninkard like a polecat. And young Ian wrinkles his nose. Phew! And here I thought it was a dangerous beastie. Well, the skunk is not too happy at this point when the dog starts barking at him. And Claire tries really hard to change the outcome that's probably going to happen. Ian, call off your dog. Skunks are dangerous. They are? But what? Asked Jamie. Polecats only stink, I explained. Skunks, Ian, no, let it alone and come inside. And then the skunk raises his tail. So yes, Rollo and young Ian get the full shot of the skunk. So Jocasta gets up from her chair, and she's moving her head back and forth, and she wants to know what's going on. And Claire realizes that Jocasta is blind. And then Aunt Jocasta handles the whole situation with excellence. And she says, Ulysses, you'd best tell cook the dinner will be late. Good humor for Jocasta. And she's very practical too, it seems. In the morning, after being soaked in the river, then scrubbed with tomato from the garden, young Ian and Rollo sat at the far end of the table near the open door. So I did post in here some links for getting the smell of skunk from dogs and humans. It's baking soda, water, and what was the other thing? And some dish soap. It says it helps better than tomatoes. But that was the standard until not too much long ago, as far as I know. Tomato juice was a big one. Jocasta takes this all in stride, and Claire notices her remarkably nice teeth. And Jocasta just suggests they take a ride out to the turpentine works in the forest above River Run. It will take the day to go out and return to the house. The plantation must be very large. She says the bees give a hot and fair report for the weather. Bees come up throughout the Outlander books, so I think it's important to pay attention to them. And the 9th book is called Go Tell the Bees. So Diana takes it very seriously in the last one that will be out hopefully the end of this year, maybe early next year. Fergus asked to borrow a horse to go into town to post a letter to Marsley in Jamaica. And then Jocasta mentions for a 4th time to consider River Run their home. In the short span of 12 hours or so, she has brought it up. I believe she has a plan. She is a Mackenzie after all. When Phaedra, Jocasta's body servant, ties a cloth around Jocasta's eyes, Claire can't stop wondering what caused her blindness. She'd love to get a peek into those eyes. She can't help herself. She's a doctor. When they get to the stable, Claire expects they'll take a coach to the turpentine works, but Jocasta is planning to ride her horse alongside the rest of them. She asks Jamie to confirm the horse's leg is healthy. She had gotten spooked by a snake and injured herself. The auntie has a plan. The horse groom tells the story of the snake and subsequent injury. Just like the young boy speaking Gaelic, his Aberdeen accent and verbiage are fascinating. He's clearly not Scottish. So this groom is a young black man. This book has slaves in it. The colonies were built with slavery as a backbone. And it's really horrible. And it's difficult for me to read. And the language that is used in some of these chapters is going to be difficult for you as well. I'm all for keeping the integrity of the work, but we have to understand the time period and not look at it through our 21st century senses. It's so difficult. I can't imagine ever owning other people. It's unbelievable that anybody has ever thought it was okay to own people, and that it still happens today on a regular basis in other parts of the world. It's really quite difficult. But we can't get away from it because it was the reality of the times. River Run is a very large plantation. Its longleaf pine forest covered 1/3 of the colony. Tobacco, indigo, timber, pitch, and turpentine were among the production. It hosted its sawmill and river rights. The largest contractor of River Run was none other than the British Navy. Jocasta explained all the businesses in great detail to Jamie as they rode. They came upon a turpentine tree, and she explains the processes of getting the sap out. One of her workers appears utilizing the help of a mule, Clarence the mule to be exact, who brayed happily in greeting. If you haven't read past Drums of Autumn yet, he has importance. The worker had been disfigured by a pitch explosion. Jocasta says he's lucky to be alive. Seems like a dangerous task. They arrived at the sheds at the turpentine works. 3 uniformed British naval officers and another man were waiting for them. So the man who wasn't part of the Navy was Jocasta's particular friend, Farquhar Campbell. He's important in this story and to Jocasta. And this particular friend seems too happy and agreeable in meeting Jamie. And he knows something odd is going on, but can't quite put his finger on it. He appeared sincerely delighted to meet Jamie, which struck me as odd. Not that most people weren't happy to meet Jamie. He's quite a prepossessing man, if I do say so. But there was an air almost of relief in Campbell's effusive greeting, which seemed unusual for someone whose outward appearance was entirely one of reserve and taciturnity. "I'm flattered that you should have spared a moment's thought to me, Mr. Campbell. Gentlemen, I'm pleased to make your acquaintance as well." I think Jamie's been bamboozled by his aunt. Jocasta says it's too hot for her to go back outside. She stays while the men conduct business. Claire heads out for a tour of the grounds, and she takes in the processes that are going on. Turpentine is cooked down to pitch and takes many workers to accomplish it. It can be a dangerous undertaking. Claire looks back at the shed. The naval men, Campbell and Jamie, are all in deep discussion over the papers, while Jocasta stands in the corner listening intently. Josh, the tour guide for Claire, Says, Miss Joe does hate not to have the charge of things. I havena heard her myself, but ye lass, Phaedra, did say as how mistress takes on when she cannot manage something, a rantin' dreadful. She says, and stampin' something fierce. I don't know what accent that was, so just go with me. It's a Southern Scot accent. That's what I heard in my head. So the people on the plantation, or that were born onto the estate, all they know is Gaelic and Scots English. That's what they've been raised on. And Josh came from another estate where an Aberdeenan, a man from Aberdeen, ran it or owned it. So that's all he knows. Chaos erupts behind Claire. There's an underground explosion. Thankfully, no one was hurt. Apparently, pitch explosions are commonplace. It is a dangerous business. I wonder if this is a foreshadowing of something Claire is going to be doing in the future, working with some volatile substance. Poor Jocasta was left in the shed without anyone giving her detail. Farquhar steps in to explain all that has happened. Now at this point, we have the naval officers and Farquhar Campbell and Jocasta standing there and Jamie, and he's trying to diffuse the awkwardness by pointing to lunch. Wolf, the naval man, needs to sign the contracts. And so over lunch, Claire learned much about how the contracts work. She also learned that Wolf is bigoted against Scottish people. If there is one area of endeavour at which I'll admit the Scotch excel, the lieutenant proclaimed rather pompously, taking a good-sized swallow of his third cup of whiskey, it is in the production of drink. In most other respects, he went on, leaning toward me confidentially, they are a race as both lazy and stubborn, which a pair of traits which renders them unfit for. So one of the ensigns decided to make a distraction, but then afterward, he says to Claire, but I collect you are not Scotch, ma'am. Your voice is most melodious and well-bred, and may I say so, you have no trace of a barbarous accent in spite of your associations. How rude. So they decide getting Wolf drunk on the good whiskey is the way to his signature on the dotted line. Jamie was out helping getting the area cleaned up after the explosion. As another form of lubricating the deal, Jocasta has a second bottle of whiskey put in the lieutenant's saddlebag. He's not a very nice man. Jocasta's smile might have been stitched on. Mr. Campbell beside her gave me the barest flick of grey eyebrows and looked austere. Evidently stabbing the lieutenant through the heart with a fruit knife wasn't on, at least not until he signed the requisition order. So I did the next best thing I could think of. I picked up the whiskey bottle and refilled it to the brim. So Mr. Wolf proclaims that Jamie's managing credibly outside. He's doing a good job. Ugh, so rude. And after the second bottle of whiskey is put into the saddlebag, it's really time to end this meeting. So Mr. Campbell whips out the folded papers and puts it in front of Wolf and said, just there. Oh, why not? The lieutenant said recklessly and dipped his quill. So they got him drunk as a skunk, haha, in order to sign the papers. Jeez. Doesn't Wolf know you should never go shopping when inebriated? Really, what a jerk this guy is. Nobody wants to deal with him, it seems. Jamie is worse for wear after helping reorder things after the explosion. Jocasta wants to know if he'd like to clean up first. My ablutions can wait. First I wish to know the meaning of yon wee charade. And he gives Mr. Campbell a dark blue look. I am lured to the forest upon the pretext of smelling turpentine. And before I ken where I am, I'm sitting with the British Navy, saying aye and nay to matters I ken nothing of. With you, wee Manny, kicking my shins under the table like a trained monkey. This makes Jocasta smile. Campbell sighs. He looks very neat and tidy. He apologizes and said they didn't have any time and it was very fortuitous for him to be coming at right when this meeting was going to be taking place. And Jamie says, indeed. Well, as I perceive, we have a bit of time at present. I invite you to do so now. So Jocasta tries to put it off and says, will you not sit down? Ulysses comes with a linen sheet to put on the chair so Jamie can sit even though he's dirty. So this way he won't get the furniture dirty. And a cup of hard cider was put into their hands. And he drank it. And then he says, well then, Mr. Campbell. And Campbell explains it's a matter of the Navy. More of Lieutenant Wolfe. He is a problem. And this is where Jamie learns the majority of River Run's revenues were derived from the sale of its timber and turpentine products. The largest and most profitable customer was the British Navy, of course. But because there was not a time of war going on, the contracts were getting tougher and tougher to get. So they weren't as dependable. And before Hector died, he used to drink with Wolfe, and he'd give him a little extra, like another bottle, just like Jocasta had. But there isn't as much money for bribes now, and Hector's gone. And secondarily, after Hector died, Lieutenant Wolfe went to Jocasta and proposed marriage. And this really did make Jamie choke on his drink for a moment. But Jocasta says it wasn't her person he was interested in, it was her land. And Claire says, I suppose that explains the lieutenant's offensive behavior at lunch. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, but the blokes don't like it either. She's funny. Campbell agrees. They're fragile things. Jocasta thinks the only thing that Wolfe has affection for is the bottle. And then Jamie now also wants to know, since you raised the matter of affection, Aunt, might I inquire as to the interests of your particular friend? Mr. Campbell returned the stare. I have a wife at home, sir, and 8 weans, the eldest of whom is perhaps a few years older than yourself. But I kent Hector Cameron for more than 30 years, and I'll do my best for his wife for the sake of his friendship and hers. And Jocasta, lowers her lashes, and Claire notices the effect. She expresses how helpful Farquhar has been. Jamie is still skeptical, of course. And we learn about the overseer, who is a good overseer, except he likes to drink a little bit too much on his own. Not very good. So because Mr. Burns, the overseer, is not competent at the contracts and making sure they're not messed up, this is where Jamie comes in. Here's how it goes. Your aunt is more than capable of managing the business of the estate with Ulysses to assist her in the documentary aspects. However, as you will have seen yourself, there are physical concerns to the running of it as well. That was the point that Lieutenant Wolfe put to me. that I could not expect to manage my property alone, and me not only a woman, but sightless as well. I could not, he said, depend upon Burns, unable as I am to go to the forest and the mill to see what the man is doing or not doing. Which is true enough. It is a proverb amongst us. Happiness is a son old enough to be factor, for when it's a matter of money or slaves, you cannot trust anyone save your kin. Enter Jamie Fraser. So, really, Farquhar was going to step in and help with the contract negotiation and talk to Wolfe and oversee this part of the business process. But when finding out that Jamie was coming, Auntie made a plan. She wanted Farquhar to inform the lieutenant that her nephew was coming to take up the management of River Run. She figured he'd be more cautious that way if there was a kinsman standing by. So that's part of the reason why Wolfe was totally rude at the lunch. It's because now he really doesn't like Scotsmen, right? Ugh, what a mess. So she totally set Jamie up, didn't tell him at all what her plans were. They were completely premeditated. And she's a Mackenzie, through and through, man. That is conniving and cunning. She hoodwinked him into helping her because she wasn't sure if he would go along with the ruse, with the deception that he was taking over. Do you think she really planned it to be a deception, or does she want Jamie to take over for her? Jamie may have found his match in her, for sure. She's going to be one tough old bird to outwit. Well, she's not really that old. She's like 60. She's only 10 years older than me, but, you know, they seemed older. And Jamie says, Frasers are stubborn as rocks, and Mackenzies are charming as larks in the field, but sly as foxes with it. Definitely his aunt. Definitely his uncles. And at this, Fergus returns from town, looking as if he's been up to no good. Jamie thinks he's been to a brothel. But he says he met with some French fur traders who needed help translating French into English, and he helped them, and they gave him a meal at their inn. And he said when he was at the postmaster, there was an envelope waiting for Jamie. 3 letters were inside. 1 from his sister and 2 others from somebody else. He chooses to read brother-in-law Ian's letter first. Jenny's letter, he thinks, will require whiskey. Claire moves over to sit next to Jamie to read with him. Ian calls Jamie brother as the salutation. And it turns out that Jenny no longer wants to harm Jamie as she did before. You will see from the enclosed that you are restored to my wife's good graces. She has quite ceased to talk of you in the same breath with old Scratch, and have heard no recent references to emasculation which may relieve your mind. Oh, that's so funny. Jenny was really gunning for Jamie after the whole young Ian getting taken by pirates, and then they had the whole adventure. Now he's safe and sound. He tells of Lollybrock life and the hardships. He gives a word of his children and a new grandchild. And Simon of Lovett visited them. Remember, it's their cousin, Jamie's cousin, from his grandfather. He's looking for regimental recruits. And he's making a name for himself in the colonies. Jamie may hear of him. The grandchildren were so enamored with his stories they played Indians. I put in parentheses savages, which is the book uses, and included some of the adults to act as the Highland Regiment. And this letter is closed with Ian saying that Scots were emigrating at epidemic numbers to the colonies. The Highlands were ravaged after Culloden. There was starvation. There was no work. There was no money to be made. It was really horrendous. The second letter from Ian was marked private and had a wax seal. This letter is not to be shared with the larger letter for mass consumption or reading. And Ian asks if young Ian can stay with Claire and Jamie. Now, brother, I have a matter of some concern to put to you, upon which I write separately, so that you might share my larger letter with Ian without disclosing this matter. Your last letter spoke of putting Ian aboard ship in Charleston. Should this have occurred, we will, of course, welcome his coming with joy. However, if by chance he has not yet quitted your company, it is our wish that he remain with you, should this obligation be not unpleasing to you and to Claire. Ian and Jenny are worried young Ian will get pressed into military service. Poverty is rampant, and there's little hope for anything better in the Scottish Highlands, even if it means serving the German usurper. Why should they not seize the chance of reclaiming the notion of manhood, even should it mean they wear the tartan and carry a sword in the service of a German usurper? I think sometimes this is the worst of it. Not only that murder and injustice have been loosed unchecked upon us without hope of cure or recourse, but that our young men, our hope and future, should be thus piped away, squandered for profit of the conqueror, and paid in the small coin of their pride. That's some passionate words from Ian Murray. And there was a break in his writing. And when he comes back, he says, I must beg pardon for the passion of my words. I had not meant to say so much, but the temptation to open my heart to you, as I always have, is overwhelming. These are things I would not say to Jenny, though I imagine she knows them. To the point, then, I grow garrulous. Young Jamie and Michael are well enough for the present. At least we have no fear that either of them will be tempted by a soldier's life. And he goes on to say that young Ian would likely be tempted. I mean, he has an adventurous spirit, and he'd be better off staying with Jamie. I could ask no better guardian or example for him than yourself. I know I ask a great favour of you in this matter. Still, I hope the situation will not be entirely without benefit to you beyond the presumed great pleasure of Ian's company. The great pleasure. That boy gets himself into trouble all the time. But Jamie had been correct on the worry there is over young Ian's future. The letter stopped and started again. And Ian writes of the look in Simon's eyes since Culloden. He fears for him. He goes on to say he has seen the same in Jamie's eyes and feared for his soul since Culloden. I know too well the sights that freeze a man's heart to harden his eyes in that fashion. I trust that you will forgive my frankness, but I feared for your soul many times since Culloden. I have not spoken of the matter to Jenny, but she has seen it too. She is a woman forby, and will know you in ways I cannot. It will be that fear, I think, that caused her to throw Leary at your head. I did think the match ill-made, but... Here a large, deliberate blotch obscured several lines. You are fortunate in Claire. Ugh. He's pouring his heart out. How long must it have taken him to write that letter? He further states Simon's only link to humanity is the care he must take of his men. And he closes his letter. Thus I give you to each other, and may God's blessing and mine be with you both. Write as soon as you may. We hunger for news of you and for your accounts of the exotic precincts in which you now abide. Your most affectionate brother, Ian Murray. And that's my cat in the background. She's normally very quiet, but she's been climbing the curtains, so I apologize. She's trying to be helpful today, apparently. We don't often hear from Ian Murray. These 2 letters give great insight to him as a man, husband, father, friend. He's often the quiet behind the bold Jenny. He's a good man. He's a brother to Jamie. Jocasta proves she's a Mackenzie in her opening play. The woman is good. I'd say she's even dangerous. She clearly wants Jamie to take over the running of the estate, in air quotes, because she doesn't really want to lose her control and power. But the illusion of Jamie running everything, She has no heir or husband. I imagine she's a woman who's nearly always gets what she wants. Claire doesn't have much to do with this chapter. She's the observer. I would love to be a fly on the wall when she and Jamie go to bed and talk. It looks like young Ian is staying with Claire and Jamie, at least for the time being. He'll be thrilled to pieces over the news. What's coming up? The next podcast will have chapters 11 and 12. And how can you participate? You can send your comments, questions, thoughts, ideas to contact@adramofOutlander.com or call the listener line and leave me a message, 719-425-9444. If you're reading ahead, you can leave comments for any part of the book at that time too. And join the weekly Twitter chat Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern Time using the hashtag ADOO. Comments or messages may be included in the podcast or the written post. The biggest way you can support the podcast is to go to the social media pages and group on Facebook, which is a Dram of Outlander page, a Dram of Outlander group. You have to answer a few questions to join, so I know that you're not a bot or a troll. On Twitter and Instagram, it's Dram of Outlander. And again, the email is contact@adramofoutlander.com. And the listener line is 719-425-9444. So I got some feedback this week to read to you. The first note comes from Kelly Mills. I'm in love with your podcast. I just wanted you to know how much I appreciate all your thoughtful commentary and hard work. I'm going back in time, having just found them, as well as DOA. Thank you, Kelly. I'm glad that you're on board and listening to the podcast. Another note came from Jennifer. Hi, Desiree. Wanted to email you to say how much I really enjoy listening to your podcast! I can't even imagine the amount of time you put into it each week, and I wanted you to know how much I appreciate your hard work. Thank you very much. It takes somewhere around 8 hours a week, maybe 10, depending on the content. And she discovered the TV show when she was on maternity leave with her first son. Ooh, that's exciting. Congratulations. She loves historical fiction and became immediately hooked. So she's gone through all the books now between seasons 2 and 3, and she decided to do the audiobooks. I read the books and do the audiobooks. Yes, Jennifer, you're going to find yourself in big trouble because I have the hardcovers, I have all the ebooks, and I have all the audiobooks. I am a bit of an addict. I find that the audiobooks give a different texture to the stories, and it's a different medium, but it does spark the same center in the brain. So when you're listening, you still are actually reading. Oh, the Lord John series. It's awesome. I think he's amazing. And the Lord John books remind me of adult Hardy Boys books. Oh, thank you for listening to the podcast and for sending me your notes. And I'm waving to Georgia from Colorado. And this note comes from Meredith of Everett, Washington. Thank you for your emails every week, Meredith. I can't wait to see Aunt Jocasta's very large house, the way it is described. It's beautiful. And I very much like Jocasta herself, as well as her symbolic relationship with her butler, Ulysses. By the way, the actress they've selected to play her will be fantastic, I believe. Ooh, The actress playing Jocasta next season looks like she's a cross between Kate Winslet and Emily Blunt. I love the part with the skunk. I doubt they'll include it in the series, though, and I wonder how much drama they'll include at the mill. I was a little surprised that it took everyone, including Claire, so long to figure out that Aunt Jocasta was blind. Well, it was simply a matter of an hour or two, but I think it's because they were taking in everything else. There was so much stimulus going on, and she had everything so well crafted, it's hard to tell that she's blind. It's pretty seamless how everything goes together in her home. And as to your question about when season 3 is going to be released, I haven't seen anything or heard anything yet. So as soon as I find out, I'll post it on Facebook and on Twitter, and I will include it in the podcast too. And Meredith sent me a secondary note that was a reminder from the last podcast. And yes, I was aware that I had labeled a couple of things 119. It was simply a typo. So it's fixed now. The first episode 119 is actually episode 118, and I did take care of it. But she put a little note in about the public executions. She really thinks that it helped people not be detached from the realities of loss. And perhaps it did keep people thoughtful about their actions a little bit more than now. And so she thinks that you can't value life without looking death square in the face. I could agree with you. I have seen dead bodies, and it's really hard. Maybe now everything is so fabricated with television and computer games and how everything looks that maybe we value it less now. I don't know. It's hard to say, because in some circumstances we value it much more. I mean, several years ago, the president sent rescuers for one captain. It was amazing. Around the world. No other country would do that. But then in other areas, we don't value human life at all. So I like what you said. It's thoughtful. Thank you. And it's not offensive. I want your guys' input, and I want you to give me your valuable and honest input. I think it's important. Like I said, I don't have the only point of view, but I'm the one with the microphone. The other way that you can help the podcast is to financially support it. Patreon.com/A Dram of Outlander. I am a solo podcaster, and I put my heart, soul, and finances into the running of the website and the podcast and all the upkeep. So I appreciate you, and every single dollar counts. And if you would like to make a one-time offering, just email or leave me a voicemail, and I will tell you how to do that. So please share the podcast. Tell people to listen. Go to Apple Podcast or Stitcher or Google Play and leave a review. That also helps people find me. Interact on social media, over on Twitter or Instagram or the Facebook group or pages. That brings people in. And I do this for you, for my listeners, and there are quite a few of you now. And I want to be able to keep this going. And as long as the TV show goes, and through all the books, because it's wonderful. And I love Outlander and what it's brought to my life in all the different capacities. And I'm here to enjoy it with you and to share it with you. So thank you so much for listening. And until next time, Slán je va.